just like a soldier, I keep on moving forward, always getting closer, I'm marching till it's over. I'm just like a soldier, I keep on moving forward, always getting closer, I'm marching till it's over. I'm just like a soldier, I keep on moving forward, always getting closer, marching till it's over.
Right, I know this one's late, kind of. I had originally recorded it, got it on time, and then I found out that I used the wrong microphone. So we're going to do this again. We're going to do it right. I'm going to be as I'm going to use as little salt as possible. But we're going to get this done. Okay, today I'm going to try to explain a little bit about the United States Air Force with a simple introduction. A little bit of background. I was a soldier, never an airman. What I know is stock standard, very little, and I did have to do a bit of research for this. All right, next slide. The mission of the United States Air Force is to fly, fight, and win air power at any time, anywhere. Nice and simple. The United States Army's was full of word salad, buzzwords, and things that's more at home with a corporate boardroom than a military setting. United States Air Force makes it nice and simple for us. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, to talk about the Air Force, we unfortunately have to talk about my least favorite subject, nuclear power. Reason I hate nuclear power is I play a lot of games. I like war as a thought process, not as an actual practice. War is a tragedy. It is a human tragedy and is a disappointment every time that we engage in it. Sometimes it is necessary. With nuclear weapons, we are either strategic or tactical. Strategic being large scale city destroyers, tactical being, well, they're still terrible, but they're far smaller. You use a tactical warhead against, say, an armored column or a military base. You use a strategic warhead to piss off Google Maps. All right. The United States Air Force is responsible for 2/3 of the American nuclear triad. The United States Air Force uses the 60 heavy bombers to drop either nuclear bombs or launch nuclear cruise missiles or nuclear ballistic missiles, shorter range than the other leg of the nuclear triad being the ground-based strategic deterrent or intercontinental ballistic missiles. I believe the United States is still using the Minuteman series that can reach just about anywhere around the world. The last leg we've already talked about being the Ohio-class ballistic missile submarines. One little interesting side note of history is the United States Army used to carry nuclear weapons as well. That on the right would be the Davy Crockett nuclear mortar. Uh, to steal a quote from or a ism from Tex Talks BattleTech, this is what happens when no one in the design party is sober. We're going to take a mortar, take 3 dudes, and launch it at a enemy position. The thought process was during the Cold War, Russia would roll through East Germany into West Germany, having several soldiers around with small tactical nuclear warheads to either destroy large parts of the oncoming Russian column or to slow them down so the rest of NATO can get ready and get into the fight. Thankfully, sobriety prevailed. They got rid of these because I don't ever think it's a good idea to have your operators of a weapons system within the fallout range of that actual weapon system. Here was the plan in the 1950s. It was called Operation Chrome Dome. It started 1960s, as I said. My notes here say, prior to the advent of the ICBM and ballistic submarines, the U.S. kept a fleet of B 52D long range strategic bombers constantly circling the US and Canada in case of a nuclear strike launched against the US or Canada to quickly react and strike back by flying over the Bering Strait or the Arctic Circle to deliver their bombs, mostly to Moscow. That came to an end. The, the interesting part here, the part that I actually liked, was keeping these bombers flying. They all would take off from about the same air bases. We were using our logistics capacity and doing mid-air refueling for these guys. They were up for long, long, long hours, flying circles around. So we were already flexing our logistics muscles in the early nuclear age. And then we talk about the difference between cruise and ballistic missiles. This is a little bit more interesting to me because you don't have to use a nuclear warhead on it. You can use a conventional high explosive warhead or just a kinetic penetrator. Ballistic missiles, as you can see on the screen, go up, across, and down. Simple. It's just a ballistic arc. It's a horseshoe. It's a rainbow of death, if you will. While the cruise missile, you can program to fly like an aircraft, taking random ups and downs, follow as close as possible to the Earth if you want. It can also fly left or right. Uh, yeah. So when you're watching the news and they say, well, X party used a cruise missile strike, now you know how a cruise missile strike could follow. Whereas a ballistic missile strike goes up and then down. That is why the Iskander and the Kinzhal, um, ballistic missiles that Russia has been using against Ukraine, get shot down so often since we gave Ukraine air defenses with the Patriot. It's a very easy trajectory to follow. The United States Air Force has the largest fleet in the world by a far margin with over 5,500 frames in use. Some simple numbers I've got here: uh, 606 aerial tankers, 31 AWACS, logistics and transport over 4,000 airframes, 261 A-10s, 30 AC-130s. AC-130s will not make an appearance in this video. They get their own, with over 1,432 fighters. Yeah. Bombers numbers are a little nebulous here, but we'll get there. First thing we're going to go over is our cargo capacity and some of the history on that. The United States Air Force is one of the largest logistics arms of the United States military, period. Uh, you want something somewhere, they can get it there. Tanks, APCs, helicopters, yeah, hell, even other aircraft. And while the United States Navy does a hell of a lot with aerial or no, with underway replenishment, so one ship will feed munitions and food and such to another ship. The United States Air Force goes all over the world, and a lot of times when a ship pulls into a naval port, the Air Force got its supplies there. Okay, this is especially special and important to me because as a grunt, you're going to send me someplace I don't want to go, someplace where there is no Walmart, Kroger, uh, Albertsons, Publix, whatever. And I have to rely on the U.S. military to get me my food, my ammo, new clothes if I happen to rip mine up, new gear, hell, even batteries. The United States Air Force gets it there. Then the Army gives it to me. If you really screw up, though, and we plan on staying for a long time, the United States Air Force can deploy fully functional Burger Kings, thanks to our Air Force. And actually, when I was in, was that Kuwait? Yeah, Kuwait and Bagram, they had fully functional Subways and Pizza Huts. So whether you like it or not, if America's staying for a while, we're making sure our soldiers are happy, which should be very good for everyone involved because a guy that wants some good food and ain't getting some good food and is living off MREs is in a very bad mood all the time. And one of the biggest flexes we've ever done with our logistics capacity is the Berlin airlift. Quick history: after World War II, Germany was split in two. You had East Germany, West Germany. West Germany was split between the US, France, and the UK, and East Germany was administered by the USSR. our Soviet Union. The same was done with Berlin, which resided wholly in East Germany. I'll link a Fat Electrician video here because he does a hell of a job explaining it, and he's far funnier than I'll ever be. However, simple numbers here. Or before we get into the numbers, the USSR did not want to share. They cut off border access and were cutting off West Berlin. They were starved, had no power in the middle of winter. They were freezing, they were starving. The United States and then Great Britain tag teamed for the greatest logistical flex of all time. Using aircraft, and especially the old C-47s and then later frames, and their limited capacity, fed, clothed, and brought everything to the city that people would ever need. So by the numbers, it was 1,500 flights a day with 12 tons a day. At the end of it, when the USSR finally gave up and allowed supplies in, there were over 2.3 million tons of supplies brought into the city through this airlift and over 189,000 flights. Aerial refueling, one of the coolest things that the U.S. Air Force can do. Instead of taking off, flying X amount of range, landing, refueling, taking off again, adding a lot of time to any mission, whether it just be for deploying your aircraft or, you know, just moving personnel and their airframes around, or even combat missions. The US Air Force has decided instead, we're just going to take a gas station and put it in the sky. The United States operates 75% of the world's aerial tankers with 606 airframes that extend mission time, the range, and range of US aircraft, expanding the mission scope and capabilities. This is important because, as we're about to see when I go through different airframes later, I list the range. That range is always going to be the ferry range, so unloaded range without weapons, munitions, any of that, and with external fuel tanks. But with these, you can pretty much ignore that range for the United States aircraft because they can always fly if they wanted to, if we wanted them to, with a full weapons payload and still get them onto target with enough fuel to get back to the tanker, reload, and then get home. Then we have the special mission aircraft. One I like to talk about here is the AWACS, Advanced Warning and Control System. This thing is air traffic control in the sky. It can coordinate other U.S. aircraft, share its radar data. Radar on this thing is that giant shell on the back. Pops used to call them shellbacks. It can warn of incoming fighters. It can warn of incoming bombers. It can warn of incoming missiles. And it can coordinate United States aircraft, take all their data, take all of its data, and then disperse it back amongst out the fleet so everyone has a complete view and picture. One cool thing about these, and then some communications aircraft, which I was unable to find literally any information on other than they exist, is if satellite communications went down, so no cell phones, or the internet went down, we can form a chain or a web of these. So the United States government will always have communication with its forces around the world, seeing as United States forces are always deployed and stationed around the world. Losing touch with your soldiers or them not having any guidance is always a bad idea. So the eggheads over at the Air Force decided it would be a good idea if they did this. Honestly, it's something that most of us would never think of. Okay, now we get into the things that make my tiny Neanderthal brain, we'll go with that, Neanderthal brain happy. The B-1 Lancer, which happens to be my favorite bomber, just because of how sleek and sexy it is. I mean, look at that. Look at the curves. Anyway, we have 45 of these airframes in service right now, according to the Google machine and USAirforce.com. .mil, and several other sources. The range on these things, which, like I said, we can functionally ignore with United States aircraft, is 7,455.8 miles. Its speed is Mach 1.25, or 1.25 times the speed of sound, equating to 950 miles per hour. Payload is 75,000 pounds, is the heaviest in any United States bomber. It can carry unguided bombs, GPS guided bombs, laser guided bombs, bunker busters, standoff weapons like cruise missiles or glide bombs, naval mines, and more. These things were originally designed to replace the B 52 and I think the B 58, which was a supersonic bomber but lesser capacity. The B 52 is still around, the 58 is not. And these things were originally designed to deliver nuclear weapons. However, after a couple treaties, we took that capability away. So instead, they now just change the topography of everything. Next up would be our B-52 Stratofortress, one of the oldest airframes that we have. God, it is a great aircraft. It's a massive aircraft. It has a range of 8,800 miles. It can fly at 595 miles an hour and a payload of 70,000 pounds. This thing can carry gravity bombs, cluster bombs, precision guided missiles, laser guided bombs, GPS guided bombs, JDAMs, cruise missiles, glide bombs, and has the apparent ability to drop nuclear ordnance. I mean, this was Operation Chrome Dome's baby right here. We have signed a treaty with Russia back in the day, limiting the amount of airframes we can have of these. So instead, we just keep upgrading them. I think we've signed 2 contracts in either the past year or the past 2 years to upgrade these things even further. The one that I remember off the top of my head is getting Rolls-Royce jet engines, some of the best jet engines in the world from the UK, to put on this thing, more efficient, more powerful. So you can see that speed of 595 miles an hour changing very soon. The thing is, Rolls-Royce had to redesign the engines to do a double formation. Like you see here, they only made single stacks, so now they're doing double stacks just for the B-52. This airframe has had its life extension or lifetime extended. It'll be in service well past 2050, over 100 years old at that time. I personally believe these things will be around long after I pass away. They'll be ready for World War III, 4, 5, 6, and Solar War 1. Then we got the B-2 Spirit stealth bomber. We have 20 of these airframes available currently. It has a range of 6,900 miles, a speed of 628 miles per hour, a payload of 40,000 pounds, which doesn't seem all that much. However, when you can get 40,000 pounds of explosive ordnance into someone's backyard without them ever knowing you're coming, that's massive. And from here on, we're going to talk about the radar cross section of all the other aircraft. Radar cross section is how big something appears to radar. So this thing with a radar cross section of, let me see, 0.0001 or tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, 1/10,000th of a square meter is about the size of a bumblebee to a radar. I look bigger, me personally, look bigger to a radar than this flying house. It can carry gravity bombs, cluster bombs, precision guided missiles, laser guided bombs, GPS guided bombs, JDAMs, cruise missiles, glide bombs, and can deploy nuclear ordnance. Rather awesome. Bombers are one of the ways that we can either intimidate people to prevent a fight or end a fight faster, so everyone and less people involved as a total end up dying. There's also the ability for them to level infrastructure, so enemy can't make as many, say, tanks or guns or anything that supports those. Once again, bringing the fight to a close sooner, and if nothing else, then denying those assets to the enemy to protect American lives in the long run as well. Okay, before I proceed any further, we have to talk about the generations of fighter jets. We've talked about generations of war before. Now we talk about generations of fighter jets, especially in this case, fourth and fifth generation, with a little bit of touch on sixth generation. But overall, first generation fighter jets started with like the Messerschmitt in World War II, the earliest. Um, each generation gained more and more ability as well as versatility. The first ones were more like rockets. Okay. The second and third gained a little bit or gained more speed, more ability, such as to use missiles or computers or guidance. Fourth generation, and every single aircraft I'm going to talk about in the fourth generation today isn't exactly a fourth generation, as weird as it sounds. United States would classify them as a 4.5. Other parts of the world would call them 4 plus or 4 plus plus generation. In other words, the frame started as fourth generation and then has been upgraded. Fourth generation fighter jets are characterized by speed, maneuverability, weapons payload, which is a big thing, dogfighting, and multi-role and fly-by-wire. These are United States definitions. We don't really, as the United States doesn't get too specific with the list. Number one, because we don't want the rest of the world to know what we consider to be advanced and what we consider to be mundane in our military technology. Believe it or not. Um, but yeah, every single aircraft that we're going to talk about in terms of fighters is multi-role. They can dogfight, do air to air, long range, air to ground. Many of them can be equipped to do electronic warfare. Um, then we come into the fifth generation. This is your newest line generation. Okay. So things like F-22, F-35. These are characterized with stealth, air dominance, super cruise, advanced avionics, and sensors. They network with each other. They have low probability intercept radar or sensors, and electronic warfare. Now, LPI, the best way I can describe it to you is coming from my mind as a grunt. Using night vision, nods, those cool little monoculars, you can use a very low power light that most standard naked human eyes, Mark 1 eyeball, cannot see, but it lights up the area around you very well with those nods. That's what LPI radar is like. So, using an amplification, you can see further, but most radar not configured to understand it can't see back. So you're not walking around in a dark room with a flashlight. Okay. Sixth generation is all speculative. There hasn't been a sixth generation fighter produced yet. There has been rumors of some coming out of China, but China just deployed its fifth generation fighter in 2017. So I'm very skeptical about any of those. I mean, I talk trash about other countries a lot. However, this is more healthy criticism than anything else. So, sixth generation are speculated, rumored to have AI integration, advanced stealth, manned and unmanned teaming. That concept is also called the loyal wingman. Uh, a channel, Perun from Australia, he does. Is he Australian or is he New Zealander? From down under, anyway. He does a great video on this. I should link it. Actually, let me go ahead and write that down. Anyway, it's a drone that sticks with the fighter and follows directions from it. Uh, it can also, if need be, take a missile for the fighter. That way, you're saving human life and just losing some technology or some tech, some kit in the process, which is a far better trade, at least to everyone involved's opinion. It also has augmented reality integration. Augmented reality being like Pokemon Go on your phone, where it overlays a lot of. So the F-35 has a very specialized helmet that does this for you. Instead of having a small little heads-up display that you're trying to follow around on your dashboard, you've got all the information you need on your visor. Every sixth generation fighter is rumored to start using that instead of having a tiny little HUD that you have to look at. And then, of course, one thing that has gone from generation to generation to generation, first through upcoming sixth, is advanced range and accuracy of weapons. Um, it's just part of the process. You have to crawl before you can walk, walk before you can run, run before you can sprint. Okay. Right here is a plane that I used to write off. I never really thought of the F-16 as much as this tiny little thing. In my mind, it was always an interceptor. Interceptor is a small, fast fighter that you send up to intercept bombers. However, the F-16 has proven me wrong over the years so many times. It is a capable fighter, obviously a capable interceptor, and a capable ground attacker. This thing has a range of, by itself, using fuel tanks and no aerial refueling, of 2,450 miles, a speed of 1,353 miles, a payload of 2,700 or 27,400 pounds, and an RCS, radar cross section again, of 1.2 meters squared. That's actually incredibly tiny, but this is the newest version of the F-16, the Block 7072 or the F-16V Viper. They've gotten some stealth upgrades, and they've definitely packed on the pounds. The original F-16s were much tinier. However, they've put on a new body kit basically, and a lot of that comes with stealth coating, things that absorb radar materials and rework the body a little bit to deflect radar. These things can carry air-to-air missiles such as the AIM-9 Sidewinder, the Magic 2, the ASRAM, the AIM-7, the Python 4, the AIM-132, and the Iris-T. Most of these I have absolutely no idea. I just know that they kill other airplanes. I have heard the ASRAM is newer, and it is an advanced, longer range air-to-air missile. Basically, just like with a gunfight, the longer out you can reach and touch somebody, the less danger you're in. So if you have to go up to somebody with like a pellet gun to tag him, well, you're obviously in range if he's got something more powerful. That's the entire idea behind planes, at least in this modern warfare world. So it also comes with air-to-ground missiles, such as the AGM-119, AGM-84, AGM-65G Maverick, and the AGM-88 Harm. We'll come right back to that Harm in just a second. Bombs. Pave-way laser-guided bombs in the GBU-15. It can also be equipped with ECM pods, in other words, electronic countermeasures. It scrambles radar, it scrambles IR tracking, and it messes with enemy communications. And it has the M61A1 Vulcan 20mm Gatling style rotary cannon. Mint. Okay, well, let's come back to that Harm for a second. The Harm missile is a anti-radiation missile. It looks for sources of high radiation, such as a radar tower or a communications mast. The F-16 took over a mission called Wild Weasel from another airframe, from a third generation airframe. And it is the most dangerous, insane mission that you can ask any airplane to do. So, as a soldier, for me to advance, I like to have air cover. I like to have our planes above me, because enemy planes dropping bombs on me cause me to have a bad day. But there's surface to air missiles, or SAMs, and air defenses. Okay, for me to get to those air defenses, I have to go through ground where their airplanes can hit me. So the United States Air Force decided, say, hold my nukes and watch this. They outfitted small, fast aircraft to penetrate enemy airspace, low and fast as they can, as in the most contested and dangerous airspace you can imagine, to launch those anti-radiation missiles to take out enemy air cover or enemy surface to air defenses or enemy communications. Uh, I have nothing but respect for these pilots. You'll see on the tail the Whiskey Whiskey, or WW, standing for Wild Weasel. That's how you know what mission this aircraft is for, and that's how you know the guy getting in it is quite possibly insane, but he is a goddamn hero. And you know what? Just as a treat, because I love the sound of it, we're going to listen to a F-16 gun run. That was the sound of 6,600 rounds per minute. It is godly. My wife showed me a video. It was TikTok style, though as of today, TikTok's gone. Anyway, of some of the most horrifying sounds in war. And this was actually number one. I go, F-16 gun run? What are you talking about? And then that sound came up. I'm like, oh, that's actually pretty cool. So that is your F-16. It is definitely one of the most versatile multi-role aircraft, and we just gave several to Ukraine. Uh, Given what we know about these things and what we know about their contemporaries being used by Russia, I expect these to make a decent difference in the air power difference over there. So next up is the F-15, one of the most famous fourth generation fighters of all time. The F-15EX Strike Eagle 2, new upgrade package. It's so sleek and sexy. It has a range of 2,070 miles, a speed of 1,650 miles, moving at Mach 2.5. A payload of 2,000 or 29,500 pounds, and an RCS of 1 meter squared. It's about the same size as me to a radar. Seeing as this thing's about the size of my truck times 5, that's pretty excellent. Some background about the F-15s. Number one, they've got like 106, 109 confirmed air-to-air kills with 0 losses. And if that wasn't a big enough flex, dunking on other countries like that, we had to break the backboard. One of these things during a Desert Storm decided it was going to take out a helicopter with a gravity bomb. I need to stress this again. A bomb. He lined up a laser designator, and the bomb, not missile, guided in onto it, landed on the helicopter, and blew it up. That is the only confirmed air-to-air kill with a bomb in aviation history. These things can carry the AIM-9LM infrared guided sidewinder missiles, the AIM-7FM radar guided Sparrow missiles, and the AIM-RAM radar guided missiles. JDAMs, of course, because everything we have can carry a JDAM. Wouldn't be multi-role if you couldn't attack things on the ground, right? Also, the AIM-120s, newer, funner, longer range toys, and GBUs, or general munitions, unguided bombs, laser guided bombs. So the reason that I decided to slap on infrared, radar, and radar is Russia has developed several airframes that can do a very famous maneuver called a Cobra. Airplane comes up, keeps its forward velocity while putting its thrusters down, or its engines, its afterburners down, to confuse an infrared guided missile. Unfortunately for Russians, where they are building planes to fight us, and we like things that are radar guided, while they like things that are infrared. Basically, it's hiding its heat for um, it's hiding its heat from heat-seeking missiles or infrared guided missiles, but is presenting a larger radar cross section for our radar guided Sparrows or AMRAAMs. So, possibly, like, I like Russian aircraft. They're very pretty, but a little bit less emphasis on doing cool party tricks and more emphasis on fighting ability would probably do a lot for you. Speaking of which, we're going to talk about the MiG 31 Foxhound. This is the replacement to the plane that the F 15 was built to beat. Let's talk about that for half a second. The Soviets came up with a jet and they oversold it. It was the Foxbat. They put out so much information on it. It is the fastest, this, that, the third. And the United States looked at all these numbers and information that the Soviets put out and go, well, we have to build something to beat this. And we came up with the F 15. It turned out that the plane that we built to beat that, the F 15, or the plane that we built the F 15 to beat, wasn't nearly as good. So we basically made a monster, fearing a monster that didn't exist. And then because we had already built the F 15, we needed something better than that. We built the F 22. But this here is the MiG 31 Foxhound. Um, Personal bias here. I don't like MiGs. To me, they all look like boxes. I mean, granted, I'm not an aircraft engineer, so anything these guys build will be a trillion times better than what I build because I can't build jack. Okay. But this has a range of 2,050 miles, a speed of 1,864 miles per hour, a payload of 20,000 pounds, a radar cross section of 15 meters squared, so larger than my truck. And it can carry, and all the foreign aircraft here will have an asterisk because foreign militaries don't like to put out everything that their planes can do, just like we don't on the internet, but we get a lot less information from them. Um, so it can carry the R-33 air-to-air missiles, the KH 47 Mark II Kinzhal missiles. Um, you hear a lot of Russian fanboys talk about Kinzhal, hypersonic Kinzhal. Okay, that's a ballistic missile. We've talked about how they go up and down like a horseshoe. And what makes it, quote, hypersonic is using its speed plus terminal velocity. The United States has been able to do that for a long time using ballistic missiles. Now, if it were, say, a cruise missile that could go hypersonic or 5 times the speed of sound, that would be impressive because I don't think anyone's able to do that. The air friction from the air, just like you rubbing your hand on your carpet and your hand gets warm, uh, air will do that too at a certain speed. If you get hypersonic with something like a cruise missile, it'll rip itself apart or melt. But anyway, moving on, it also has the GSH 623 millimeter cannon. Pretty based. I like big guns. And then we move on to China's fourth generation offering, which is a ripoff of one of Russia's fourth generation offerings. This is the Xinyang F or J16 Red Eagle. Okay, it has a range of 2,423 miles, a speed of 1,345 miles per hour, a payload of 1,700 or 17,636 pounds. Real quick timeout. You'll see with American payloads that it comes to a nice rounded even number, and with a lot of these foreign aircraft, it's going to be, some rounded 636 in this case number. That's on me because the numbers they put out are in kilograms and I had to convert over to freedom units. So you're getting a more precise number here basically of how heavy they can carry, while the US numbers are more rounded. Just transparency and honesty here. This thing also has a radar cross section of 3 meters squared. Not too bad for a large jet. It can carry, once again, there's our asterisk, the PL-9, PL-10 ASR, PL-12, PL-15, PL-17. All those are air-to-air missiles. I have no idea their capabilities. I do believe the bigger the number, the longer the range, from some forums that I read doing research for this. Yeah, that's about it there. I don't know if they're radar guided, if they're cruise or IR, if they're laser. I just don't know. I do know that it can also use the YJ-83K anti-ship missile. China has put in a lot of investment lately into anti-ship capabilities. I wonder why. We have the largest navy by weight, but the first and second largest navies by weight in the world. The first being the United States Navy, and then the second being our museum ships, like old battleships. Um, it also can use the LS-500J laser guided bomb. Hey, at least I know that that thing can be guided in with lasers instead of just dumb drop. Anti-radiation missiles, so it expects to do the same mission as the F-16 with Wild Weasel, and the Ying's 3 targeting pod. I really hope I said that right. But one thing I want you to notice, like I said, when this was introduced, it is a ripoff of a Russian aircraft, the Sukhois. I love Sukhois. They are sleek, sexy, beautiful. And China has been doing this for years. It will buy 5 or 6 Russian airframes and then blatantly copy them without license. There have been agreements between China and Russia to jointly build an aircraft, and then China pulls out and then completes the aircraft. They just do this. Um, you know what? If it works, it works. Get ahead however you can. If you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. If you get caught, you're not trying hard enough, or you just don't care. Now, one thing I want to point out here is with a radar cross section of 3 meters squared, as well as the overall size of this actual aircraft, going from wingtip to wingtip, top to bottom, pulling off a Wild Weasel mission or a anti-SAM mission is going to be hard for this thing. And while Sukhois are known for their maneuverability and speed, the fact of the matter is that even a soldier like me carrying a Stinger missile or, a man portable anti-air missile would be able to tag one of these things, let alone our, say, Patriots or Sea Whiz, like was linked in the Navy, but we have those for Army because why not? It's called the Sea Ram. Would be able to tear one of these things apart. Also, because of its larger size, even though it's very maneuverable at lower altitudes, it's going to have problems dodging. You might accidentally hit a tree, or if you pull up, you're going to get tagged by another one. It just is what it is. Now we come to our 5th generations. The F-22 Raptor was the first 5th generation fighter in the world. I remember playing a Sega Genesis game. And for those of you younger than 30, Sega Genesis is a very old console game. You had a D-pad and 3 buttons. That was it. That's how old the Sega is. Sega Genesis game named F-22 Raptor, and this came out in 1992. We were developing 5th generation aircraft in the 80s. And the reason I say the 80s when the game came out in 92 is because prior to that, it was all classified. We got some information in the 90s. It was finally ready to go in the early 2000s. You're going to notice one thing about all these 5th generation aircraft is they do not have the payload capacity of their 4th generation counterparts. Reason being, they like to be stealthy. 4th generation, it was who could carry the most anti-air missiles or anti-ground ordnance into a fight at a time. The F-14 was a great example of this. That was a naval fighter, but she's been retired. Poor girl. She could carry, I don't even know, but she could track 20 targets on her radar and engage 6 of them at once at long range with her purpose-built Phoenix missile. The 5th generation fighters have an internal weapons bay, and then if the mission requires it, they can put weapons on their wings. When it comes to a fight between 5th generation aircraft, what you're going to see the pilots do is release their wing mounted weapons first so they could regain their stealthy ability or stealthy appearance on radar. and then try to maneuver in on each other using stealth. And then they will use their internal weapons. Um, so this thing, most beautiful fifth generation fighter of all time, with a range of 1,864 miles, a speed of 1,500 miles per hour, a payload of 22,160 pounds, and a RCS of, let me see, 0. Tens, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, 1/10,000th of a meter squared. It can carry the AIM 120 AMRAM, the AIM 9 Sidewinder, the GBU 32 JDAM, and the GBU 39 small diameter bomb. Then we move on to our F 35s. There are 3 versions of the F 35 currently in use by the United States, and then more of those around the world. Here's why. A, B, and C, standing for A, I believe, is the Air Force's variant, B being the Navy variant, and C being the Marine Corps' variant. Marine Corps gets their own air power. Okay, and then as for the rest of the world, this is the most exported fifth generation fighter around the world, period. End of story. It is so capable that other countries clamor for it. Why they don't clamor for the F 22 is Congress got together, and one of the few times where both parties and both houses of Congress could get along, and said the F 22 is too advanced to sell to anyone in the world. But the F 35, we said that they can buy it. Take that for what it is. In my mind, it says the F 22 is more advanced, but the F 35 does have some really cool capabilities that aren't listed on our sheet here. It has a range of 1,380 miles, a speed of 1,200 miles per hour, a payload of, I was supposed to say 18,000, but I was tired when I made these slides, and an RCS of, I should have just written this down in words, but tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000. So, 10,000s. Tiny. Still larger than the F 22. Tens of thousands. I can't even think of how to say the word right now, but it's about the size of your hand, according to a radar, if not one of your fingers. It can carry the AIM 120, the AMRAM, or AIM 120 AMRAM, the AIM 9X Sidewinder, the AIM 120C as an air-to-air missile, and it can drop GBU 31 JDAMs, and it also has a Gatling gun, um, mainly because they're trying to replace one of my favorite planes that we'll get into later with this thing. So it does carry the GAU 22A 20 or 22 millimeter Gatling gun. Okay, now we get into our adversary's fifth generation aircraft, and the first up is the Su 57 Felon. First thing, once again, this is made by Sukhoi. And you heard me say earlier, I love Sukhois. They are beautiful aircraft. And all things aside, the Su 57 Felon is a beautiful airplane. Look at that. Even the paint job's nice. Now, if we take a look at it, a range of 2,175 miles, a speed of 1,535 miles per hour, a payload of 22,047 pounds, and RCS of between 0.1 and 1 meter squared. That is massive compared to the American offerings. It can carry, and here's our askers, of R-77Ms, R-74M2s, R-37 air-to-air missiles. It can carry the KH-38M, the KH-59 Mark II air-to-ground missiles, the KH-35U, the KH-31 anti-ship missiles, the KH-58 USHK anti-radiation missiles, so they expect it to do about the same thing as the F-16 with Wild Weasel missions, though it is far larger, and we've already talked about the problems with large aircraft doing that. It can also carry drill cluster bombs and has a 30 millimeter cannon. Now, here's the deal. When I put in here RCS of between 0.1 and 1 meter squared, I've been following the production of this aircraft for a long while because why? I like planes. Planes are cool. Okay. And the between zero point 0.1 and 1 meter squared is for a reason. It depends on where you're looking at this airplane from. If you're looking at it head on from nose back, it's going to be far smaller. That's the way they designed this thing. It isn't an actual true stealth fighter. It is a low observable fighter and is made for a dogfight rather than the regular fifth generation mission of destroying something from as far out as possible. It's meant to get in close and try to finish with short range air to air missiles or its cannon. When you look at it from behind, you'll see that the radar cross section is far larger, or if you get a side profile of it, it just is what it is. Russia has been having a problem lately with developing newer generations of weapons. They've been under sanctions for quite a while, even before 2022 when they invaded Ukraine. I think they've been under many sanctions since 2014 when they invaded Ukraine the first time through Crimea. And there's only, I think I looked it up, 32 of these airframes in service. Russia's having a hard time getting a lot of the electronics they need for them. Why? Sanctions. So these things are, I would call them more of prototyping aircraft rather than actual use aircraft. Hell, our more advanced F-22s, we have 186 of them. We have 600 and change F-35s, but we're buying 1,800 more. Many of those will be sold around the world, but it's a stark difference between the industrial capacity of Russia and the United States, as well as what sanctions can do to a country. Now we get on into China's offering. This is the, please forgive me if I mispronounce this, anyone from China, the Chengdu J-20. It is a very peculiar shaped aircraft. This thing, I don't know when they started development, but I know it was officially commissioned and ready to go in 2017. Range of 1,677 miles, a speed of 1,534.54 miles per hour. Once again, that's the metric to freedom conversion. Payload of 2,700, 900, or 27,998 pounds. I don't know why that keeps on tripping me up. And then it has an RCS of 6/1000ths of a meter, and that is estimated by Aircraft 101. China is obviously not too excited to give out too much information about this. Aircraft 101 broke it down pretty easily, and there is a caveat on that as well. That is on a stationary grounded aircraft that they were able to look at these readings. When it comes to flying, we can see a few things. Its stabilizers in the back or its tail are quite large. They will catch a lot of radar. And then it has the canards up front, which are these little itty bitty winglets used to help control the aircraft if the overall frame is less stable. You see it a lot on delta wing designs, such as the French Rafale. I believe it is a Rafale. Anyway, it helps just stabilize the design, make it easier to fly. Those also catch a lot of radar cross section. And all these surfaces, the canards, the tail rudders, and parts of the wings can flex and move to help control the aircraft, increasing and decreasing its radar cross section. It can carry, once again, caveats again, the PL-10 short-range air-to-air missiles, PL-12 mid-range air-to-air missiles, the PL-15 long-range air-to-air missiles, and the LS-650, LS-6100, the FT-7 precision-guided munitions. That is all the information I am able to find out there. And then, as a treat, just as a treat for everyone for sticking around so long with me today, whenever you watch this, we're gonna cover my best friend, the A-10 Warthog or Thunderbolt 2. It is the ugliest, beautiful angel on the planet. Um, when I mentioned earlier that the F-35 had a cannon more than likely to replace a airframe, this is the airframe they're looking at replacing. You talk to any soldier out there, and we will tell you that is a dumb idea. The A-10 is a wonderful monster. Personally, I've had one of these save my life in Afghanistan on the day I earned my combat infantry badge. Flew over us and used that 30 millimeter GAU 8A Gatling gun. She has a range of 2,578 miles. She is slow, moving at 420 miles per hour, a payload of 16,000 pounds. RCS, I looked around and can't find anything about it. We were upfront about F-16s, F-15s, F-22s, F-35s. I can't find anything on the RCS of the A-10, a far older frame. It can carry the Mark 82 and Mark 84 bombs, incendiary cluster bombs because screw everyone around you and fire. The AGM 65 anti ground missiles, the AIM 9 Sidewinder air to air missile, ECM pods, and of course that big gun. Here's the history of this thing. In the 80s, no one was sober. Um, Cocaine boardrooms is what I like to call them. And they thought, let's make a giant gun. Okay, they made a giant gun, being General Electric, the same guys that make your clothes washer, your dishwasher, your fridge. And then they're like, well, what can we put it on? It's too big to put on a tank. This thing, the gun itself is larger than a Volkswagen Beetle. So they're like, well, let's go talk to some aircraft manufacturers and see if we can get it on a plane. Aircraft manufacturer looked at it and goes, I'm just going to build a plane around it. Cocaine boardrooms. Okay, so now they have an airplane that has a giant gun on it. They have to come up with a purpose for it. During the Cold War, like we talked about earlier, the USSR was expected to take giant tank columns from East Germany into West Germany. The idea of this plane is to be an attritionable asset. It is very cheap to make, very cheap to maintain. If you lose it, you can build another fairly easy. Russian tank columns have organic inbuilt anti-air assets, like the Tunguska tank. The damn thing has like 4 Strela anti-air missiles and then 2 anti-aircraft guns on it. This plane was meant to go forth, drop as many of its bombs and anti-ground missiles as it could, rip up whatever it could with that Gatling gun, try to get out. It has a titanium bathtub that the pilot sits in. The entire cockpit is reinforced with rather thick titanium. And I will link Fat Electrician's videos to this in here. And yeah, it had like an attrition rate of 1 or no, it's 6 per every 100 sorties, which doesn't sound like a lot. But when you take into account how many sorties the US was thinking of running just to hold back a Russian tank advance for the rest of NATO to get in gear and get in on the fight, there were several thousand sorties planned per day. These things would not last very long. However, the damage they would reap is disproportional. And just because you've hung out with me to here, we're going to watch an A-10 gun run. So let's sum it up. The United States Air Force is one of the most flexible branches of the United States military, period. It has the logistics capacity to keep someone like me in the fight for as long as possible, as long as need be, as well as save thousands upon thousands of lives just by bringing supplies. It also has the ability to delete enemy airfields or enemy positions with its long range strategic bombers, or, as we've talked about with the fighters, that aren't just fighters, they're also mini bombers or fighters or gun platforms. The United States Air Force is the most advanced Air Force in the world and the largest in the world. And because of that, grunts like me have a special love and appreciation for them. Besides that, if it wasn't for them, I'd have to walk everywhere. But to round us out, let's go ahead and use a quote That is, the U.S. Army will never control the ground under the sky if the U.S. Air Force does not control the sky over the ground. Coming from Colonel Gene Cirillo, United States Air Force, retired. And I think that sums up everything absolutely perfectly. Next week, we're going to talk about the Marine Corps. I can already feel the hate. If you haven't already, go ahead, like, comment, subscribe. Let us know your feedback, and I'll catch you guys next time.
Attack with every word, then act with class as they hear me snap. I got nothing to lose, cause I fought and felt the bruise. Now I'm not the one confused.